Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna call this meeting of our instruction work group to order. Good evening, everybody. We have one speaker tonight participating online.
Our speaker is Kirby Mack. Are you in person?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that's fine. You can come up to this laptop here.
Right here?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Speaking to.
Just a computer.
Okay.
Just so we can see you, the speaker's in the room, so you don't have to unmute or anything, but whenever you're ready.
Is this fine?
Yep.
Okay. Greetings. My name is Kirby Mack, and I'm here on behalf of Blacks for Political and Social Action. We are the only Black PAC in the state of Wisconsin. We are an advocacy group comprised of civil rights leaders, past and present, ministers, attorneys, community leaders, and citizens who have chosen to speak in a concerted voice on important issues that demand a united stance. In April of 2023, we, along with community partners, held for the first time a conference geared toward Black and Brown parents with the intent of listening to our parents in order to better advocate for our children. Close to 200 people attended. A synopsis of what we heard from parents was that our Black and Brown children appeared to be invisible to this district. They felt that MMSD and board administrators, district administrators have failed Black and Brown children for many years, and that this board is continuing in the same pattern. This year, our nation will celebrate the 70th anniversary of the first landmark of Brown versus Board decision, which ushered in a new era of access to public accommodations for Black Americans, particularly in education. It was the impetus for the civil rights movement. The right to read is the most important civil rights issue of our time. Yet our children's scores should be an embarrassment to any and all who care about Black and Brown children. Many of our members work for Madison College and are alarmed at the scores of Black and Brown children that come from MMSD and cannot pass into basic entry-level coursework. Either you don't see our community or you don't see our community as a priority and are comfortable with the low scores of Black and Brown children. Therefore, we want to put a face on Black and Brown children so that you can see what's happening under your watch. This past weekend, our education committee chair sent each of you a PowerPoint describing our goal, which is to put a face on Black children in MMSD. F for financial, A for academics, C for communications, E for expectations. MMSD touts 3 major goals. Goal number 3 states African-American children and youth excel in school. You know and have seen data which suggests that the district is failing Black and Brown children miserably. As you are keenly aware, only 6.8% of our children entering into 4th grade are reading at a proficient level. As you begin preparing for the 2024-25 budget, I'm here to ask that MMSD establish a general fund budgetary line item for goal 3. The budget establishes your priorities, hence our concern about the paltry $450,000 annual appropriation, which is less than 1% of your budget. It demonstrates a lack of intentional commitment to our children. The Black representation of the student population is at 18%. And that ridiculous $450,000 designated to Black excellence funds paid through community engagement funds seems to be a joke with our community, and we are unable to find it humorous. There's not a question of can we do this? The question is, will we do it? Yes, and we will continue to hold people accountable in this district who are getting paid to do this work. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group dated January 8th, 2024.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
7-0. The focus of our conversation is two items this evening. We will have our main subject area be on English language learners, ELL plan and progress. We will also hear from the Student Wellness Advisory update. And I'm going to turn it over to Cindy Green.
Thank you, Board Chair Muldrow. Good evening, everybody. Jesse, would you mind pulling up the slide deck? Thank you. Could you go to the next slide, please? As always, we'd like to start our meetings ensuring that we are grounded in our 3 strategic framework goals. Hopefully tonight you will see how we are working towards realizing these goals. Next slide, please. And our core values, always trying to live by the core values we set as MMSD. Next slide, please. So our outcomes for tonight for our major topic is to review our district responsibilities and programming for our English learners, and also provide an update to the board from the progress that we have made since we received a 2019 evaluation that was aligned to the 2015 English language learner plan. There are a few supplementary documents that the Board of Education receives that I think will support this conversation, and happy to have follow-up. One is the actual 2015 plan that we wrote to serve our English learners. The other document is the 2019 evaluation that was associated with that plan, which is the document that we as a MMSD are working from. And then in addition to that, we provided another supplementary guide that provides more detail about who our English learners are, some additional data to support, and just some additional study guide information that we thought would be helpful to the Board of Education. As we engage in tonight's presentation, we want to make sure that we're continuing to think about our 3 guiding practices that we have lifted in every one of our meetings. These practices are what we are using to drive improvement in MMSD. A reminder that we are focusing on our district improvement goals as one of those practices, continuing to try and build on our core principles of the improvement science, and also making sure that we are improving our data literacy. I hope tonight you will see excellent examples of these practices. We are getting better by aligning to our framework, focusing on our goals, and using our routines for discipline inquiry. I also want to take a minute to introduce my colleagues who will be doing a large part of the content for tonight. Next to me, we have our coordinator of dual language immersion programming, Alejandra Jacqueline. We have Leah Zepeda-Vaughn, who is our director of multilingual programs and services. And we have Dr. Gabi Bell, who is our director of literacy and biliteracy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leah Zepeda-Vaughn.
Thank you. So tonight I'd like to start our presentation by really talking about who our English learners in MMS are. Next slide, please. And so we have over 5,300 current English learners who have been identified in our district. And this is the racial demographic of our 5,300 English learners. Next slide, please. Most of our English learners were born here in Madison, which I know sometimes can be something that perhaps the general public isn't necessarily aware of, but a lot of our students are born right here, and we have over 100 languages that are spoken and represented here in MMSD. Next slide. This slide really demonstrates the range across all of our schools in terms of how many English learners are present. So we have between schools as low as 4% of their population are English learners, up to almost half of their student body comprising the number of students in the building. And so you can see that a lot of our dual language immersion programs, developmental bilingual programs, are housed in schools that currently have a large percentage of our English learner population. Next slide. Overall, of those students that we've identified as English learners, 5,100 of those parents have approved that they receive services developed in the district. We have 69 students who identify as English learners or heritage language speakers of Hmong that are participating in our Hmong bilingual program. And over 3,691 students are part of our Spanish DLI or DBE. Next, we'd like to take a little bit, a moment to talk a little bit about our responsibilities as a district when we talk about serving our English learners. So there are a variety of federal laws, state statutes that support how we give this access to education for our English learners. It's a civil thing. And so a lot of the things that we do in service of English learners means that we are helping them achieve the same academic goals as all of our other students in the district. And we do so by providing supplemental supports that allow them access to that core content. We also have a state statute in Wisconsin that is one of the strongest in the nation in regards to bilingual education. And so we have a statutory responsibility to provide our English learners with a form of bilingual education. And we also have the responsibility to serve students who, regardless of their immigration status. So when they come to us, we accept them with open arms, and that is part of it.
So in alignment of those like statutes and laws in compliance of that work, MMSD offers English as a second language services, ESL, in all our schools K-12. And the main goal is to make sure that the students are receiving equitable access to opportunities and high level of education, high quality of education, at the same time that they are developing the English proficiency. As part of those ESL services, we also have the dual language immersion program in DLI in Spanish, the developmental bilingual education program that also is in Spanish, and our monolingual program. Next slide, please. Here is all the schools that currently offer bilingual programs. This is divided by feeder patterns, and as I mentioned, ESL services are offered in all our schools K-12.
So next we'll transition to talking a little bit about the recommendations that we received from our 2019 evaluation of our English learner plan and talk about where we are and where we are going. So one of the recommendations from the 2019 had to do with the organizational structure that we had here in MMSD. We had this responsibility for our English learners situated in one department that really supported a lot of the work. And so the recommendation was to make sure that our responsibilities are shared across our organization. And so what we've been able to do is ensure that there are several departments across the organization that are really responsible for supporting English learners and making sure that we're providing that equitable instruction. And as you can see, so these are some of the departments that are represented in that work. Next slide. The next recommendation from the plan had to do with ways in which we could improve English language proficiency outcomes. So one of the things that we're required to do is ensure that English learners are receiving English language development support in terms of moving towards proficiency in English. And so one of the things that we were super excited about this past year was that the board really helped us invest. It's a historic investment. We've never been able to purchase curriculum that's specifically for English language development. And through that work that the board did, we were able to purchase materials. We are also training staff on those new materials, making progress towards our understanding and implementation of the English language developments. Next slide. This slide shows over the past several years, the English language proficiency growth scores for our students. So one way that we can take a look at how our current English learners are doing in terms of moving towards proficiency is to look at that growth. And you can see that students who are in earlier grades are often more likely to meet those growth targets than in later grades. And those growth targets are set by the Department of Public Instruction, and we measure that progress through the access test every year. Next slide, please. Another recommendation from the plan had to do with improving our data monitoring systems. So with the purchase of the Elevation data platform, we've been able to really make an impact in how our staff are able to quickly access information and visualize that information and use it towards providing data-driven instruction. So we will continue to train staff on that tool and really invest in different ways in which they can use the new features that are part of that platform.
So, and the areas of communication and language support. One of the recommendations was related with the individual learning plans, ILPs for students. So in response to that recommendation, a committee that was integrated by ESL and BRT staff were working and providing recommendations to improve access and communication with families. Now, our next step is that we are going to be taking those recommendations and making sure that we can implement using a new data platform that will support creation, distribution, and delivery of the ILPs. Also, part of the recommendations were like we can continue supporting the students, providing opportunities to lift the family's voice. And we started with that work, then COVID hit, had to pause with the family meetings that we had. And now we are back on track, having these sessions with multilingual families. Also, in addition, we got a new Pashto interpreter that gives opportunity to our group of families to also have access to the communication and information that the school district has. We will continue working now on creating an advisory committee that will open opportunity to community members and families who also support and raising the voice of multilingual in our district.
All right. The 2019 EL plan also provided us with some recommendations connected to programming and curricular resources. Specifically, we would like to connect around the two that are on the slide. The first one being the recommendation of providing core instructional resources for the teaching of literacy and biliteracy and for English language development. And we have spent quite a bit of time with the board. We have talked about the adoption of the literacy and biliteracy resources. I want to echo Leah's sentiment of gratitude for the Board of Education for the historical investment that have allowed us for the first time in the district to have core instructional resources for the supplemental teaching of English language development for English language learners. So that is the highlight for that one. And of course, our next step is the continued professional development to ensure that we are integrating language attentive practices for the teaching of English language development connected to core instruction. The second recommendation was an invitation for the Board of Education and for us as an organization to continue to examine the program types that we have for English language learners to be able to access the civil code that they have for supplemental instruction. The highlight for that is that our Spanish language bilingual programming continues to have a DLI and a DBE component, and that we are on year one of the expansion of the Hmong Heritage Program into middle school, which is something that must be celebrated. We're the only one in the state of Wisconsin that have the characteristics that it does. Our next steps are to continue to engage with the board and with the community in conversations about a potential shift from the developmental bilingual programs into dual immersion programs and the opportunity that that creates for service. Says for more English language learners into the program. So can we go to the next one, please? All right. This other area, which the plan provides us for some recommendations, is connected to academic outcomes. So once again, here we're going to concentrate on two of those. The first one being the recommendation to improve academic outcomes in both English and Spanish, according to program type. The adoption of core instructional resources has been fundamental for that. And for the context of Madison, it has been not only the adoption of resources, but also pairing that with a learning that we have done systemically for science of reading. So how it is the science of reading applies for contexts beyond English that use the Roman alphabet, which is true for and for Spanish. Our next steps are to continue this training and continue to make visible science of reading, language accelerators, and thinking about really specifically EL language profiles for our kiddos. Then the second recommendation is to develop consistency in Spanish language programming to measure student progress. I am happy to report that we are currently implementing universal screeners in Spanish and in Hmong K-8 for our programs, and that our next step is to look for tools that have psychometric qualities for fluency and comprehension, because that's the natural next step connected to that. The next slide, please. This one is a very interesting one. So let's orient ourselves on the slide. If you look on the top, what you can see that there are clearly two graphs. But if you read through the top of it, you see that the first graph is going to have outcomes or academic outcomes for English language arts. You see in the forward, the second graph is for math. If you read the left-hand side, you can see that the graphs are organized for current English language learners, so English language learners that have not been reclassified as English proficient. The band in the middle are for kiddos that were English language learners, but have been now have been reclassified as English proficient. And the third, in the bottom of it, is connected to our district average. Please note that the bands in light blue and deep blue are for proficient and advanced, and the bands in the sandy colors and the brown are for basic and below basic. So what we're seeing in Madison for English language learners that have been reclassified as English proficient is what the research says is true for English language learners, which is that they outperform their monolingual peers. So that is something to be celebrated, and it is an invitation for us to continue to invest to ensure that this population of students continue to engage. And then they can achieve at these levels. We are also seeing that our English language learners that have not been reclassified are currently performing below our district average. And hence the continued gratitude for the district for the investment and the trust that have put forth for us to be able to engage in.
Something just to make sure I'm reading the stuff right. Is that okay? So like, you know, how when you open tonight, I'm sorry. We started with like the over 5,000 students in our district. So if I'm looking at this, like the top
are those
the
5,000.
top bar would be that 5,000 who are identified.
Currently within the range that TPI says you're an English learner. And then the middle are students who have already moved out of that are now reclassified as former English learners. But that doesn't represent that 5,000.
Okay, and then the bottom again,
It's the district. The full
district, okay,
Yes,
got it,
great question.
great, thanks.
Next slide.
Is there any, okay.
So the next update is about staffing and professional learning. So as part of the current process related with this area, we have been collaborating with human resources, trying to really target recruitment for our bilingual teachers. And this collaboration includes Cultural Vistas, that is international hiring, at the same time that we are opening opportunities for our local teachers to start getting their ESL and bilingual license. We are supporting them through the tuition reimbursement program. And recently also with a partnership with Edgewood College that is offering like reduced rates and tuition rates for our staff members so they can complete their bilingual, our ESL license. Also, we are continue supporting our current teachers that are working with our students, providing them professional development related to the use of ELD resources. And this is one of the areas that we're going to continue working K-12 to make sure that we are providing better opportunities also for our long-term ELs.
Okay, so a few next steps. So one, I just want to acknowledge that this district and the board has made significant investments in ensuring that we are serving learners, both in terms of programming and also financially compared to the amount of money that comes from our state. We know how important this is, and I think we have shown that in our values through our budget and through our program. I also want to just restate that what we just provided to you is all from our 2019 evaluation that was built on the 2015 original plan. When we received that evaluation, it was also at that moment in time that COVID hit. And so we are back on track with these recommendations and really feel proud of the work that we have accomplished from those recommendations. And that is the course that we are staying on, staying steady to ensure that before we create a new plan, we actually meet the recommendations from the original plan and the evaluation. In terms of some other next steps, we see there's implications for policy. There's quite a few policies listed here that have implications for us to consider. Whether those policies are outdated or those policies also have considerations for us to move forward with the work we're continuing to do. In addition to that, as part of our long-term facilities plan and as part of where we're going in the future, the concept of thinking about a feasibility study, we believe is critical to be able to make long-term decisions around the future of our. Kind of with our schools and central office, we are continuing to work through, as I just mentioned, the recommendations from the 2019 plan. We will obviously make it an iterative process and just along the way, but we feel pretty good about where we are going. We are continuing to focus on the Hmong bilingual curriculum, as Gabi mentioned, the only one recognized in the state of Wisconsin. We have really strong partnerships across the country with a few other districts that we're really grateful for. Continuing to think about how English learners are served through Act 20, our continued programming for DLI K-12, actually for K-12 now, going into next year as we'll have our first 4K DLI program. And continuing to think about course and credit attainment for our students that. So while we know by law we have to legally serve them, I think that's an area of opportunity for us to continue to think about better ways to ensure students can stay with us longer if needed. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our board chair Muldrow to guide us in any questions and conversation.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Board Member Pearson has had her hand up the entire time. Vice President Pearson.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because I'm virtual, that I wasn't missed. So I have two questions. My first question is that I noticed that we don't have outcome data for high schoolers on this slide. From my understanding, high schoolers have been one of the largest groups that have been coming into our district recently that are in need of EL services. So I guess where are their outcomes? Or are we tracking them, or how are we tracking them?
Can I ask if you're referring to academic outcomes or English language proficiency?
So you have the slide about the plan updates, academic outcomes, forward using the forward testing, and I know for the high school it's a little different, but I just don't see either or for high school students at all.
Yeah, Maya, we would have reported out on the ACT and we did not include that. That is something we can definitely talk to our research team and see if they can put that together for us as well.
Yeah, I think it'd be really important to have the outcome data for our high schoolers. Yeah, in relation to our vision statement. So and then my other question is, how frequently are we evaluating the programming? So the last evaluation was done in 2019, and we're in 2024 now. It's 5 years later. And I understand the pandemic kind of probably put a lot of pause on things, but how frequently are we evaluating the programming?
So I would say formally from an external evaluator, we have not done that since 2019. Internally, I think we are constantly evaluating our programming based on our data that we look at as well as implementation. I don't know that we have decided yet when we would do another formal evaluation since we are still working under the 2019 one. I think when we determine where we go next with that feasibility study, which I think will be really important, will probably be our guide for a next iteration of a formalized evaluation. And one other thing I just wanted to mention, if we did put in some supplementary data slides that are in an appendix afterwards. It does not get to your question about ACT for high school, but there is some additional data as well, just if the board would like to check that out in the future. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, I saw that. I guess my comment is just that I'm not sure if ACTs are a great predictor for like the outcomes for our high schoolers in EL, just because I know like with a lot of our students, they may not go to a four-year college, and if they are their status is not if they don't have the status to be able to like get financial aid, I know that has been a barrier for a lot of students that are seeking higher education. So I'm not sure if there's a better way to kind of track that, to make sure that, you know, we're ensuring that they're succeeding. I know that when we had our listening sessions at East, was that a year ago or 2 years ago now? A lot of parents were definitely mentioning the fact of like the resources and just their children in classes. And a lot of the children are not like they're coming in with low English proficiency, however, having the same expectations to succeed. And so we're just wondering of what that looks like in terms of making sure that they graduate and graduate in a space where they have opportunities in our community. So that's why I asked those questions. Thank you.
Board Member Simkin, and then I see Board Member Castro and Board President Nichols.
Yes, thank you. I have two questions, Cindy. The first is, would you connect the dots for me on the connection between the long-range facility plan, feasibility study, and your plan for English language learners?
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks.
I will start and I'll pass it down to my colleagues if needed. The landscape of where our English learners currently reside has changed since we wrote the plan in 2015. If we go back to the slide where we show where our English learners currently are to date, one, the number of English learners has grown in the system, and two, where they reside has shifted over the last few years. So the concept of a feasibility study, we believe, is really important to help us determine if we have dual language immersion programs, for example, in all of the right schools. Do we need to add schools for dual language immersion based on our population of English learners? And also when we think about our Hmong program, for example, our Hmong program currently resides over in the Lakeview community, which is a feeder to East. And has that population shifted or grown or moved at all that we need to consider another for that? So that is part of the reason why we believe, as we're thinking about our buildings, both what is needed to have programming in our buildings, as well as which buildings may need to have new programming or even consider the space availability of our programs. We believe that feasibility study will help us see where all of our students are residing right now for consideration. Schenck Elementary School is a great example where we have dual language immersion and the student population has really grown in the last few years. So we're at a place where they are almost physically out of space. And so that's things that are really important for us to know as we both continue with programming and serve our students for the programming they need, as well as our physical spaces. Team, if anyone want to add to that? No. Okay. Does that help, Laura?
It does. And I'm just wondering, to what extent are you going to be coming to us with, these recommendations before we, decide the disbursement of resources? So Schenck being a good example. So if Schenck needs more space, is that something that will be presented to us as part of that process?
Yeah, I don't think we're at a place where we would make any recommendations at this point or going into the 2025 school year. I think we're at a place for 24-25. We We have internal data that's helped us determine that, but I do think for the future, as we're working on the facilities in our district, we want to see also if there's anything in this feasibility study of where English learners reside, to take into consideration.
Thank you. My second question is, I'm wondering, I'm not at all surprised at the success rate for students who have two full languages. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about if there's any data with a percentage or the number of students who move from EL status to no longer EL status.
I'm not sure that I understand the question. Like may I recast the question? Are you asking what data do we use to see what English language learners are reclassified?
I'm wondering, well, I am wondering how they become reclassified, but I'm also wondering how many of them become reclassified as opposed to spending their entire school career as classified as English language learners.
Okay, so I think that we're ready to answer the first part of the question. So students are reclassified in the state of Wisconsin through their performance in the access test that they take once a year while they're English language learners. For today's presentation, I don't believe that we are prepared to have the nuanced data that you're asking us to what is the rate in which students are becoming reclassified, but we can make a note of it and then we can pass it along to Ms. Green to share with the board in the future.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Board Member Castro.
Thank you. My main two questions are around staffing. So the first one is, you know, a lot of the students coming into the district now are also getting used to the Madison community at large. So I'm wondering how services in our community schools are supporting these families as they enroll in our school district. And then I'll wait to ask the second around staffing.
So if I hear you're asking how our staff are ready to support our English learners or newcomers that are coming in? Is that the question?
Yes. Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking about there's a particular opportunity with community schools to support families.
Leah, you want to?
I can start. Yeah. So what is really wonderful is that we have a wide variety of staff who are ready to support that enrollment piece. So we have our bilingual resource specialists who are there to support as families are coming in and being able to support through language. We have our social workers who are also supporting families who may need resources or other information about our community at large. And in particular, community schools are well situated because they also have those resources within their schools, right? Oftentimes directly in the building that families can access when they first show up for enrollment. In terms of some other nuances around our newcomers that are coming to the district, we actually do have a teacher leader in our department who is focused on immigrants, refugees, and newcomer families to our district to offer support when schools need it. And then I can pass it to Gabby. You have
Yeah, we have a strategy. Yes, so from the curriculum and instruction standpoint, we do kind of come like a pack to support not only the families and the needs that they might have, but for departments. So we are absolutely inclusive in ensuring that we're supporting classroom teachers so that they have the supports that they could need to be able to know where is it that the students are academic in their home language. If it is Spanish and they're in a dual language immersion program, I'm thinking a community like Leopold, for example, also connected to the English language development and connecting them with those resources. So we do calibrate centrally so then we can come and support buildings in a way that is comprehensive.
And I have
Yeah.
one additional piece.
Of course.
One additional piece that we've seen lately is thinking about trauma-informed practices as well for some of our newcomers that have experiences such as Venezuela. And so our student and staff support team has also been kind of part of this pack that Gabi just mentioned to really think about not just the social emotional needs, but any other needs as well. So that's been a really important added piece that has really helped us think about our coordination this year.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I know that some of our schools on the east side have been trying their best to help support families. But there's just the nature of some of this can be you can't fully and anticipate when refugees or migrants come to our communities. My last question is around staffing. I know that it's been a trend for a while that the most hard to fill positions are the bilingual teachers, particularly at our Title I schools. And so I'm wondering if the team has considered adjusting or thinking more intently about a recruitment and retention policies and strategies, particularly for those positions.
So yes, one of the things that we have been working really hard with human resources is to be proactive about how can we keep those efforts of recruitment in the community. Also opening opportunities for current, like there's a lot of like professionals that are joining our community that they are willing to take the work, put the work to get license in general ed, to transfer out of the country degrees into now in Madison. We are working with the Department of Public Instruction to provide guidance about how are the routes for these professionals that are teachers that can now expand their experience here in the district. We are also encouraging teachers to now take the opportunity to engage in the opportunity that Edgewood College is giving us, tuition reimbursement programs. We have been working with the recruiter of the school district going into the community, specifically places that we know that they are preparing all these professionals with MATC, job fairs, and this is like an ongoing effort. We haven't stopped doing that since the first day, making sure that we always have teachers in also when they are student teaching in the school district or even in other places, to make sure that we have in January the opportunity to get all these new teachers into the district and providing them all these opportunities of professional development is one of the reasons why they are interested in joining us.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just leave it for my fellow board members as we think about going into the budget this coming cycle, just thinking about investing real resources into into making sure that we have enough bilingual teachers and bilingual social workers, nurses, to support our students.
Board President Nichols.
Thank you. Thanks for the update. It's nice to hear about how you all have taken those recommendations and have been continuing the work. A couple of my questions are just for some meaning making around the data, and then a little bit about one of the recommendations, and then I have a policy question. So the first question I want to start with is the slide that you show on slide 8, which shows English learners in MMSD, and you show that bar graph with every school. And I guess I'm curious, for the schools that are like under 10%. At elementary, middle, and high school. So if you're a school with, you know, with 5 or 6% of your student body. Having students identified as EL, like what do the services or programming look like for those schools compared to schools that have 30, 20, 40%? If you would just describe that a little bit.
So I'm gonna maybe go back to that slide that shows that we have ESL services in all of our buildings. And then there's that subset of bilingual services. So all of those capture the ways in which we offer services. In those buildings, whether they have 4% or whether they have 45 or 50%, we have English as a second language teachers or bilingual resource teachers or both who do push in to classrooms and help support within core instruction. Sometimes they have small groups, maybe they're supporting newcomers around learning some basic language in order to be able to engage in school. And in high schools, they might be also running a small sheltered class where students are learning some content and developing English at the same time in order to move towards proficiency. Those are some of the things that we're.
Okay, so the image that's on slide 12 maybe kind of captures that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for lifting that up. Then the other thing I'm wondering around some of the data is that you have a slide in here that's about the access growth targets. And you said the growth targets are set by the Department of Public Instruction. And that's slide 17. And I can see that, and as you say on the slide, earlier grades are more likely to meet growth targets than later grades. And I see middle school, there's quite a dip. And then it goes up a little bit again in high school. So I see the access grade data. I'm sorry, not grade. I see the access growth target data. And then when I look at the other graph on the forward, ELA and math, I don't know if they're connected or not. I'm assuming they're not, but it does seem though that middle school, in both instances, or at the secondary level, it just looks like there's fewer students in the proficiency. So I don't know if maybe you can just help clarify, like, what is access telling us? And then, yeah, if you want to tell me any key insights from differences from elementary and secondary.
I'm gonna start, and then you can jump in. We were talking about this language proficiency growth, and it's being set by the state. What happens is when you start in our schools, you come in, you take a screener, that screener gives you a score. The state then decides how many years do I have to make proficient. And the state, that is a moving target. So every year, if my score goes up, my growth score might change depending on how many years I have to make proficiency. So ESSA says, I'm, as a school district, responsible for our kids getting to proficiency by 5 years. And after that, they become a long-term English learner. And that's some of that information that's in your packet. That long-term English learner is typically what you're gonna see at 5th grade into 6th, because that's the first time we can then officially identify a student as a long-term English learner. So what the hope is, right, between kindergarten and 4K, and for kindergarten and 5th grade, we are working towards building that proficiency so that student is exited and becomes a former EL.
Got it.
Former ELs, what you're gonna see in that other data set, right?
Okay.
So the current ELs in those data sets are kids in this graph who are moving towards proficiency.
Okay.
Not proficient yet, but are required to take a test in a language that they are still not proficient in. And so right? The state does offer some accommodation for for English learners to take that test, but definitely not in the sense of the support that you might be getting in a classroom in order to access that core concept. That help?
Yes,
So if I'm I'm sorry, I'm saying one more thing. If I'm an English learner and I come in 8th grade, my growth target is huge because
Yeah.
I have to catch up
Yep.
in a shorter amount of time to make that 5 years of growth or 5 years of proficiency. And the access test changes every year. And even though it's not a content test, it's an English language development
Yeah.
test. The concepts in there are matched to the grade level.
uh-huh,
And so it does then require more language for me to be able to write at grade level, speak at grade level. And so if I'm entering as a newcomer in 8th grade, I have a long way to go and a lot of things to catch up on in terms of English language development in order to show proficiency. So
okay, so this graph is more like a single point in time.
Correct.
Okay, so meaning whenever the access test is given, if you were the 7th grader when it was given, 7th graders generally are at this percent of reaching proficiency. Or no, of actually growing. They hit their growth targets. Okay, got it. Okay,
Think about it like GPS in a car. And every
Okay.
time that you turn a corner, it tell you you took the corner and you're getting closer.
yeah,
That is what the language growth targets do for us.
okay,
Because it would have been like a trickery. If they say, you have 5 years to become proficient, good luck. And then at the end, they're like, and you didn't become proficient. No, the language growth targets to help you every time you turn a corner and you're getting closer to your destination. So they're really, really important for us because it helps us see language development is complex and it takes time. So it helps us see whether or not the ways in which we're supporting students are resulting in students becoming more proficient in English.
got it, okay.
And then the
And,
forward exam is academic outcomes. It's not language development.
Yes, so think about it. So a way that you could think about it is that the access score, access test allows you, when you are not a native English speaker, allows you to see your English language proficiency, to use English to narrate, inform, explain, and argue across content.
mhm,
So can you use English to be able to explain to someone, to argue, to inform, and across all content areas?
okay,
While the forward assessment allows us to see if you are literate in English. Can you read and write? So the access, in order to be able to see if you can narrate, inform, explain, or argue, looks at our ability, I'll say our because I'm a language learner, speaking, listening, reading, and writing. For the purpose of proficiency, while the forward is about a straight out literacy
okay,
in English. And it's
okay, that is so helpful, thank you. So does the access, is it common to use the focus on growth targets? Okay, so that's very much like
That's
kind
the
of
norm.
standard normal thing, okay, got it. And, okay. Yeah, I think in my head, sometimes I was thinking about in previous years, we have shown growth. And then proficiency, and so just trying to be clear about when are we talking about something that's. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
First, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
very, very helpful, okay, thank you, so that kind of helps me on the data questions. So I have, one of the questions I have is around. The classification of the former EL. And mine is different than board member Simkin, it's more around. Does that status stay with a student the rest of their kind of career through MMSD? Like, are they?
Yep.
So we're always, so we know who was eligible for EL services. And then we know at one point, once they were able to move out, and we kind of have that for a period of time, or until they leave the district?
Yep.
Okay. Got it. And do we report anything to DPI on how the students who are now called former ELs are still doing in our district? Like, is that also something they're asking us to report?
The monitor.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. All right, thank you for that. One of the recommendations, okay, I'm almost getting there. One of the recommendations talked about increasing access to programming for English learners by shifting the remaining 2 DBE programs to DLI. Can you say a little bit more about that? Like, why do you think that was a recommendation? I saw your next steps, but yeah, I'm just curious, and I know you mentioned something, Gabby, but I don't understand the fullness of that recommendation.
So do you wanna get us started or do you want me to kick it off?
Feel free,
Yes.
one of you, and I'll chime in. Maybe explain DBE versus.
Yes, I was trying to think, where is it that we're gonna start that? So just to ground out the developmental bilingual education programs are programs in which 100% of our students are English language learners versus dual language immersion programs in which percentage of the kiddos are English language learners, native Spanish speakers, and the other half are native English speakers, Spanish language learners.
Yep.
An opportunity exists not only for integration of students and populations, but since the publication of the EL plan in 2015, 2018, but also if we look deeply at the recommendations, there were some concerns on how segregational the developmental bilingual educational programs are and how that might have been an unintended consequence, but once we knew it was a consequence, we couldn't say that it wasn't intentional anymore,
Got it.
right? So it is connected to what is our belief and value system about where is it that English language learners belong and by whom are they served? And what are the linguistic opportunities that naturally exist when I am a native Spanish speaker trying to maintain my language and learn English, but every single student in my class is in exactly the same profile that I am. And what are the opportunities that arise when I get to learn alongside students who are models for my parent language? And what does that mean for the culture of the classroom and the students' way to interact for the rest of the school community?
And the only thing I'll add, you did a beautiful job, is that we only have 2 DBE programs left in the district at 2 elementary schools. We've phased that out and replaced with DLI in every other space over the long term of when things have happened.
Which 2 elementary schools?
Stevens and
Hawthorne.
Okay. And that's taking the Hmong DBE. That's not DBE? I thought that
No.
was at one point. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
go, it's perfect.
That's a
No,
good
it's a
question.
good question. Our Hmong bilingual is a heritage language program.
So it is bilingual. Okay. All right, good. Good things are happening there.
Yes,
Um,
or program types, yeah.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, so then my last thing is you did list a number of policies that would have, I guess, implications for the board. And so I don't know exactly if you can highlight, like, what's the policy implication?
You wanna start?
Sure. So the first around English learners, it is a statute that we, as a district, are required to have a policy about our English language learners. Our current policy just has some old outdated language referring to probably structures in the org that don't exist.
Oh,
That kind of just need that refreshing.
this is multilingual global education.
The graduation policy does not specifically refer to this, the requirement that we do have to support our students through the age of 21. And
Oh.
consideration around that and perhaps what are some opportunities for our students to be able to meet those graduation requirements? That might include things like portfolios for our newcomers who come to us as a 10th grader. You know, what are some ways in which we can demonstrate that proficiency towards high school graduation, but then be cognizant of
Okay,
the promotion policy is really tying into that Act 20 piece, and so
Mm.
given that that's coming up and we have to work through what that looks like for our third graders. Really taking into consideration what that means for our English learners in the context of Act 20, really focused right now on English language literacy, right?
Mm.
For, the age of pupils also just refers back to that 18 to 21-year-old statutory responsibility. So those are why those are listed.
Okay, no, that's super helpful. So I don't know if this is a policy related question, but I am curious, since we are graduating students in our district with a seal of biliteracy. Where does that fit somewhere under our current graduation policy, or is that more seen as like I don't know, an offering, like a secondary opportunity?
Yeah, it's not within the graduation policy. It is an opportunity that students can receive and earn upon graduation, but it doesn't live specifically in the policy.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
I have two questions. So they're specific to how we're supporting families. If you have a student entering our district as a newcomer, chances are you yourself are a newcomer. And what I have seen across our district is young people who take, incredible pride in developing their ability to speak multiple languages. We have students that are not only bilingual, but trilingual. We have young people from around the world who then end up really helping to support their family in terms of navigating our processes. How do we recognize when students are taking on that additional responsibility, whether it is translating for their families or translating for their peers? I visited a class this year where one student was proactively translating everything I said for another child in class. How do we recognize that as a strength? How do we use that to inform the opportunities for a young person, not only to learn English, but mastery of their first languages?
Well, Hunter, you want to start?
So some of the opportunities that I was going to mention before is like for all the families and the students that are in the district, they always have access or information about programming. So how we can offer the programs depending on the school that they are attending. And part of the bilingual programs is that environment that really validates like what the kids are bringing into the classroom is valuable. So that they can feel proud of like what they are, like the language that they speak, how that is also part of the community where they are. And lifting that also for the parents, that they don't have to give up to what they are or their language or culture, because now they are immersing only one in language is super important. The schools and the VRS that are in the community, the family liaisons are really intentional about lifting that with the families and giving them access to that in the community when we are in schools. So I don't know.
I would say absolutely. VRSs are of critical importance as a connection between the school and families, and they are beautifully positioned to be able to develop those relationships to then understand what are our entry points. I would say, as someone that have more than 20 years in education in the United States, Madison is so beautifully positioned in its belief system and recognition of our respect and celebration for language use. And I believe that that is true in our environments. We see that in our learning blocks. We see that across program types. So I believe that we most definitely have the conditions and have structures to be able to support students regardless of program type, to feel proud and to continue to use the language and to have families connected. We are, as an organization, responsible, and the earnest is on us to communicate with families in a way that is accessible for them. So if for some reason, as an organization, we do not have people on staff that speak the language that the parents need, we have systems and protocols set in place. So once we identify what the language is, we can get an interpreter over the phone and that we can communicate with.
I greatly appreciate that, and I do think it's tempting when you have this conversation to really emphasize our Spanish speaking students, in part because they make up such a large number of our ELL young people. However, we have students from around the world, and so if you're coming to our district, you're attending this year, you're from Ukraine, we don't necessarily have somebody in the building who speaks the language you're bringing to school. I think the other part of my question is around kind of the grow your own staffing model. And as we continue to recognize that our bilingual resource teachers and our bilingual specialists are some of our more challenging positions to fill, what are we doing to help our young people realize that opportunity exists within our district? What are we doing to encourage our students who are bilingual to choose education as a profession and MMSD as the district they want to work for?
I'll start and then I'll pass it probably to Alejandra, who spent so much time supporting HR with staffing. But if you recall last Monday night, I think maybe it was, last Monday night, the board just approved a partnership with Madison College for our high school students to engage in what we call the Ed Academy or the Education Academy. And so I think that is a really good starting point in terms of finding who our students are, especially our students that are identified in places where we have large gaps, bilingual staff, male staff, etc. Those are the students that we are tapping first to take advantage of their senior year, where they can go into the Education Academy over at Madison College. Granted, next year will only be for 25 students, but I think that is one way that we're thinking about our young people right now. I think in addition to that, Alejandra alluded to some of the partnerships we've started to create for people to do tuition reimbursement for individuals that are already in our school system. But I'll let Alejandra add to that, but I would just.
So I think that one of the areas that we collaborate a lot is with school counselors, especially at high school level. Because sometimes the language becomes part of like the daily activities and everything, but also is part of your identity for a student. So when they see the value of different options we have for professions, and when these opportunities exist, they can start to see the value. They are welcome to join the school district as like not only as students, but now as a professionals. And I think that that's a work that we are going to probably be more intentional to keep reinforcing, especially when the students have been exposed to this trajectory, no matter if they just join the school district because they are newcomers and they are now in this pathway for graduation, but they can see the value of that. So probably that's work that we're gonna continue working with school counselors at high school level. Probably be more intentional to make it visible for the kids as an option to join us back, not only in the teaching role, but I think that there are tons of different opportunities that they can join the school district and use all the skill set that they have since being bilingual opens that opportunity for them.
I greatly appreciate that. My last question is really specific to retention of our current staff. I think one of the more proactive things we do is recruit staff internationally. However, staff who are recruited through that program get a pretty specific visa that lasts for about 5 years and has to be renewed in the time period of the 4th year. What are we doing to retain staff? How are we helping people to transition from visas to green cards? How are we helping people to achieve citizenship if they are interested in continuing to work for our district and support our young people?
I can start. Right now, what we are doing, definitely what we are making sure is like bringing this opportunity of international recruitment is providing the opportunity for students to have access to high quality, access to high quality bilingual education. And at the same time, we're implementing like local efforts, like to make sure that we are giving the opportunity for people that can stay for a longer period or permanent here to continue working in our system. one of the pieces of the cultural exchange program for teachers is like the goal is that they can have like this period of time skill set and then go back to countries. However, like some of them are really under that idea that that's the goal for the program. And that is giving us the opportunity to keep like reinforcing the local teachers. Historically, I know that the school district has not been involved in all the different other kind of visas. But I will pass that on for Leah. But I think like this.
No, I think it is a great question. We do continue to try and make sure that we're recruiting in-house and also, I mean, you mentioned our VRS and you mentioned other staff members, also tapping them to say, hey, here's this opportunity. You know, we have this program with Edgewood now for tuition reduction and also reimbursement. And we have several staff who have taken that on and are moving into different roles that are would require bilingual proficiency in order to do that. But I do know that the exchange teacher program that we're doing right now is just filling that space while we're trying to.
I guess I'd be really curious in the future if we could be provided with data around the retention of our bilingual staff. And a breakdown that is specific to the staff we're recruiting internationally, as you know, and the kinds of supports folks need and want from us. Because I think we've made these really tremendous investments in materials. And I think that can only go so far if you don't have the people there to connect the dots with students and do that work. So thank you all so much for the presentation.
Sure. Echo, thank you so much for the presentation. Also, big thanks to my fellow board members who asked such different types of questions. I learned a lot in your questions. Looks awesome. That's great. So much progress on what seems to be a really thorough report. One of the things that stands out to me in the recommendations from the report is what policies might be developed and offered to offset the effects of poverty on student development in English. Not that I'm expecting an answer. That's not like, what do you think? But just for the room, for me and all my colleagues about right, this calls that out as a barrier, and I think we all know that is true. And like as we're planning for stuff, like how are we thinking about that? Just calling that out. The other thing is I want you to know that I remain super interested in what we can offer to students who legally have a right to education through MMSD up until age 21. And there's a lot of room for that and a lot of exciting opportunities there. So don't be shy about that. And then the last thing, well, I guess two more things. One is that when I look at the recommendations, there's a lot about providing training, but there's also a lot about scheduling for planning, which I didn't hear in your highlights. And I know that that's a tough nut to crack, but I think it's valuable, right? No matter how much good training you have, if you don't have the time to like say, okay, how do I apply this to my classroom next consistently? It's, you know, you lean back on what you did yesterday. And then the last thing, gosh, what was it? Shoot, I should have written it down. Nope, I'm done.
It'll come to you when they're all gone.
Oh, when everybody's gone home to. Was it about PD? It's usually about PD when I talk. Thanks for laughing. Changing this. I liked the first thing you talked about, spreading out what was formerly OMGE's work over many departments. And I hope that that process means that as you're thinking about schedules and supporting schedules that can support the work, that you have lots of support. Oh yes, here it was. When, you know, I know that access scores, right? You have like reading, writing, speaking, listening. Not a question to answer right now, but I would be curious if you're finding that there are like patterns about like which skills are going well where for whom. I see you shaking your head. So if you know, I can totally talk about that. Here's just a couple of things about how that's turning out. You know, and I'm curious about it, especially because looking back through the recommendations, so much is about how do English language learners feel in the classroom? What are their opportunities to talk to peers? And where we're seeing like, okay, my oral language is like off the charts, but my reading and writing is not, or vice versa, if there are trends that you can speak on.
I can do a 20-second on the trends. I love the question. Thank you so much. So language, speaking, listening, reading, and writing can be grouped as receptive and productive skills. What we're seeing is that the sub-tests within Access are confirming what research tells us, which is that the students' receptive skills are often higher than their productive skills. And that among all the skills, writing is the most complex. So same is true for monolinguals, but it is true when you're learning a second.
Do you see any trends with depending on where in town students are or anything like that? Or is it sort of across the board, this is?
I think that we're seeing a trend particularly connected to English language learners in specific places in the progression growth. So we're seeing kiddos moving, like Leah was saying, quite naturally and fast, like they're briskly walking through it until they get to like an Access score like 3.4. And then if we are not very attentive to ensure that their language production in speaking and listening and reading is not nicely matched to writing, then they are not acquiring some very specific skills that are required. For example, the use of clauses, a movement from simple sentences to compound and complex sentences, right? Because those are explicitly the language skills or the language units that we're looking for them to be able to move forward. So as part of our professional development plan, our multi-year plan, we are working explicitly in creating opportunities for us to get better at understanding how do we intentionally do that, writing, speaking, at the same time that we're doing development. We're starting a partnership with Dr. Solana Westerlund with the theories behind the functional approach of language development. That is the theoretical foundation for the WIDA 2020. So there's some really exciting things on the horizon connected.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We're gonna move on to our next area of focus.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Board Chair, are you good?
Ready to go?
Josie, can you make sure, oh, I see Ashley, and can you make sure Lavinia? Do you see her in the Zoom?
He's there.
Oh,
video,
oh,
why not?
okay, okay. While our other teammates are transitioning out, I will start real quick about our second topic. So a reminder, our minor, as we call it, or our second topic for the night, just a minute, is an update on our superintendent's wellness advisory. We're really excited to bring forth kind of what has happened so far. I would like to introduce Ashley Petzler, who is really leading this work for the district, and also her kind of co-chair in this work, Lavinia Vapul, who is our student rep, who is really going to share some of the work from the youth voice portion of this. So they'll just walk through the memo, just uplift a few things, and I'll turn it back over to you, Board Chair Muldrow, afterwards for a discussion. So Ashley, take it away.
All right, hello. As Cindy said, my name is Ashley Pletzer, pronoun she, her. I serve as the PE Health and Wellness Coordinator for our district, and I'm here with Lavinia tonight to share an update around the Wellness Advisory. As a reminder, we officially kicked off the start of the Wellness Advisory this school year, and the advisory is made up of diverse stakeholders and is aimed to provide feedback and recommendations to the superintendent and the Board of Education around creating healthier schools for students and staff. So far this year, we've had 3 meetings, and now I'm going to pass it off to Lavinia to share some details about last meeting's last meeting.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lavinia Volpal. I'm a senior at Bell Phillips Memorial High School, as well as the youth lead on the Superintendent's Wellness Advisory. So, as the advisory has been digging into the past ad hoc recommendations to establish priorities, we have worked in groups in the following themed areas: nutrition, staff mental health, student behavior, buildings and facilities, staffing general, training, and student mental health. At our last meeting, each group outlined specific immediate recommended actions indicated in the memo. And based on these small group conversations, activities, and feedback, the top 3 areas of priority for this work include staff mental health, student mental health, and nutrition. I have a few recommendations I would like to highlight tonight. For the theme of nutrition, in response to the recommendation that reads, include salad bar implementation at the secondary level, increased culturally relevant foods, vegetarian menu items, and serving sizes to provide adequate nutrition needs. I think it's really important to include youth voice in decisions regarding updates in school food, especially since nutrition has always been a topic of interest and priority for students, for example, in Student Senate and the VPM Student Council. And for the theme of student behavior, in response to the recommendation that reads, brief staff on important details prior to scholars and families in order to keep rumors and misinformation from spreading before the official MMSD communication comes out. We just need to continue to increase transparency and communication around safety protocols so that students and staff feel prepared in crisis situations. There have been discussions around tying this to youth voice and utilizing our voice to encourage peer-to-peer education. And finally, for the theme of training, in response to the recommendation that reads, research and identify best practices for consent education that is consistent with social and more emotional learning and is developmentally appropriate. This should be at all levels, K through 12, in partnership with community agencies that provide these services minimally twice per year. MMSD youth have always voiced that they want to have consistent access and implementation to health education across all 3 grade levels within the district. And this should include a strengthened comprehensive health education curriculum that aligns with best practices and youth needs. And that is all. I will pass it back to Ashley.
Great, thank you, Lavinia. And just for next steps, our next meeting will be on February 22nd at the Holtzman Learning Center from 5:30 to 7:30. And in that space, we'll be creating action steps and goals to share with the department leads around completing some of the various identified immediate actions that are recommended. And I will now either pass it to Cindy or pause for any questions.
I'll pass it back to Board Chair Mulder. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Lavinia and Ashley.
All right. Board members, any questions or discussion? Thank you for Rosen Feldman.
Can you remind me which weekly update has the list of wellness committee members, please?
Which week?
Yeah, ish, or
I'll go back and I will check. And I'm pretty sure it was back in November because that is when we kicked it off. But a better answer will be we can provide it again in a weekly update so everyone is reminded of who is participating.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Now I'll think about my real.
It's like if only you had an encyclopedia memory of our weekly updates. I don't know, maybe. Board Member Castro.
Hey guys, just wanted to say I've had a chance to sit in on a few of these meetings, and just want to lift how popular the salad bars and the scratch cooking has been. Yeah, it's been good work so far, so thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Castro. Board President Nichols.
Yeah, I don't think I have any questions. I appreciate just hearing that the committee is up, working together, taking some of the recommendations that were passed on and paying attention to those that were kind of in the top 3. So I appreciate just seeing that there's continued attention and focus. And I look forward to, so it sounds like there will be like more specific recommendations after February 22nd meeting, right? Will those come back to us?
Yeah, we're scheduled to have another update in the spring. And depending on how far the group gets, the meetings are only about an hour and a half. And they made great progress in January. We have them scheduled for monthly. So I think we'll continue to provide updates this way and through our weekly updates. And if there are any that have budgetary considerations, we'll determine what those might look like and when they come back to the superintendent and to the Board of Education.
Okay, and I guess this is a question, but the question is, so in some of these recommended actions where it involves other departments or other people, right? Like buildings and ground, or when I see something related to professional development and developmental designs, when I see things related to better communication around safety, and how are the other folks that would be directly implicated in those actions going to be brought into the loop?
Ashley, do you want to talk about your kind of structure and your cross-functional teams that exist internally?
Yeah, so we have an internal, what's called an implementation team that's made up of different people from different departments in the different like component areas of the wellness policy, but then also in alignment with the recommendations. And so not only that space, but then part of my role is to work with those departments that this work falls into to kind of get updates, to see what support they may need, and kind of go from there. And then there's also we're just starting it tomorrow, but a coherence team that's a little bit more not just the specific leaders in these areas, but also just lead administrators to just kind of gain insight of what they're hearing around wellness policy, what maybe just to bridge coherence, I guess I would say.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. I see your hair, you've gone with darker hair, and Lavinia, good seeing you.
One person, I'm so sorry, and I see
Who's gonna come out underneath?
that I did not mention was Barb Osborne has been instrumental in this as well. And so Barb has really been working with Ashley and Lavinia, so I just wanted to name that.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yes, it's good to see you.
Any further questions or discussion? So I guess I want to voice support for investing in more nutritious food. I think it's a conversation we've gotten to have as a board. And I think that there's a series of benefits, including like making our, protecting our environment, right? Also like honoring the health and nutrition in the bodies of our young people. I want to ask about our capacity to execute that as a priority. So do we have the ability to self-sustain, salad bars? Do we have the ability, or do we have commercial kitchen space to prepare this kind of food to scale for our district?
I do not know the answer to that. I don't know, Ashley, if you have been in conversation with Josh and have an answer. If not, we'll probably have to get back to you. But Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have like a specific answer, but that's part of this process in theory of like seeing what is needed and then be able to report back what financially or staff or whatever the resources are to make something happen, to be able to have that present and then make decisions from there. And Josh Perkins would be the person that would be able to share more details, and we can reach out to him and get more information. But I think as we solidify what next actions are taken, that will help identify the answer to your question.
Lavinia and Ashley, I want to ask, have you all seen districts do this before? Have you seen districts that have edible classrooms, that grow their own food, that embed, the cultivation of food into learning? Lavinia, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I went to Spring Harbor Middle School, and we have a greenhouse that one of our science teachers, David Ropa, really takes care of, and we make sure to include the students in it and everything on that. And I would say at Spring Harbor, we definitely did include like food nutrition. We definitely did grow our own food. We incorporated that within like classrooms. We like made food out of them. And we also like made sure to emphasize composting as well. And so I think we might have also had like a form of a salad bar at Spring Harbor. I don't know if it was throughout the entire 3 years I was there, but I definitely remember something like that. And that's kind of like where I got like some ideas for like what I would hope nutrition would look like in our district. So that's like an example of where I've seen it within our district.
I really appreciate that that example comes from our district and your middle school experience. So thank you so much for highlighting that. I hope that if there is a way to connect you all with resources in order to observe how this has been done across the country and around the world, that we're able to support the learning it takes to do this well and execute it to scale, right? So that all of our schools and all of our young people have access to healthy food. And I think often that means, being realistic and gradual in our approach and thinking pretty long term. But thank you all for joining us this evening and for doing this work in the interest of our district. If there are no other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ashley.
So
Thank you, Lavinia.
I'm sorry, Board Vice President Pearson, did you want to ask questions?
no, I was saying so moved. You said a motion to adjourn, so unless someone else wants to ask some questions.
Okay,
Then I'll second it.
all right. All those in favor? Motion
Aye.
carries 7-0. Y'all have a nice night.
Thank you.
Good example.